Think about this for a second. What if an entire industry, a massive part of the digital world you use every day, could be made illegal with just the stroke of a pen? Well, that's not some hypothetical question. In India, a single new law didn't just tweak the rules for online gaming, it literally flipped the entire game board upside down.
So, to really get a handle on this, you gotta understand the scale we're talking about. This wasn't some niche market. It was a massive, multi-billion-dollar online gaming industry. Millions and millions of users were playing everything from fantasy sports to online rummy. I mean, this thing was a juggernaut in the digital economy.
And then, poof, just like that, it's basically a criminal enterprise. The Promotion and Regulation of Online Gaming Act of 2025 sent an absolute shockwave through the country, effectively banning the real money gaming that so many people knew and played.
So you have to be asking, why? Why on earth would they do something so drastic? Let's dig into the government side of the story because, a move this big doesn't just happen in a vacuum.
From the government's point of view, it was like a perfect storm brewing. There were some truly heartbreaking stories coming out, people getting into serious debt, dealing with addiction. On top of those very real social issues, there were growing fears that these gaming platforms were being used for money laundering. And then you had the legal side, which was just a total mess. Different states had different rules, and the courts were given conflicting answers. So for the government, a single nationwide ban seemed like the only clear way to cut through all that chaos.
All right, so how did they actually pull this off? How does a law just shut down an entire industry? Well, the answer is kind of brilliant in its simplicity. It all comes down to how they wrote one single definition.
Okay, so this right here, this is the engine of the whole act. An online money game is any game where you pay money to enter, a stake, hoping to win something back. But here's the killer phrase. Irrespective of whether the outcome is based on skill or chance. That little phrase is a legislative bomb.
I mean, that one sentence just completely demolishes 60 years of legal history in India. For decades, the courts had a very clear line. Games of chance, like a slot machine, were one thing, but games of skill, like rummy or fantasy sports, were seen as legitimate businesses. This new law just takes a giant eraser to that line. Suddenly, rummy, poker, fantasy cricket, they're all treated exactly the same as pure gambling.
And the way they enforce this is, well, a devastatingly effective three-pronged attack. First, you've got Section 5, a blanket ban. You can't offer the games, and you can't even play them. Then, Section 6 goes after the marketing, choking off all advertising. No more celebrity ads, no more social media promotions. And finally, the knockout punch. Section 7 tells the banks and payment companies to just stop the money flow. It's designed to completely starve the industry out of existence.
And if you break these rules, the penalties are designed to make you think twice, and then think again. For the companies, the operators, we're talking a maximum fine of 1 crore rupees.
But it's not just about the money, not by a long shot. There's also jail time on the table, up to 3 years in prison. These are not just slaps on the wrist, they're serious criminal charges. And this is where the law gets really serious. The offenses are what's called cognizable and non-bailable. Now, what does that actually mean in plain English? It means the police can arrest you without a warrant. And getting bail? It's not an automatic right you can count on. It's why a lot of people are calling this a pretty draconian enforcement plan.
So what happens when you have a brand new law that just flies in the face of, about 60 years of court decisions? Well, you get a massive legal showdown, and that's exactly what was guaranteed to happen.
And just look at the history they're up against. This goes all the way back to 1957, when the Supreme Court first said that skill-based games are protected businesses. Then it happened again in '68 with rummy, and again in '96 with horse racing. Even in just the last few years, high courts have repeatedly said fantasy sports are games of skill. Time and time again, the courts have drawn a line that this new act just ignores.
So of course, the industry is fighting back, and they're fighting back hard in the courts. Their whole argument is that this law stomps all over their fundamental rights. They're saying the ban goes way too far, that it violates their right to do business. They're also saying it's just not fair. It violates the right to equality by randomly lumping skill games in with gambling. And get this, it leads to this totally bizarre situation where you can play rummy for money in a physical club and it's perfectly legal, but do the exact same thing on your phone and suddenly you're a criminal.
Okay, so we've talked about the law itself and the legal fight, but what about the real world? What did this actually do to the economy and to real people? The fallout was immediate and it was huge.
First off, just the sheer scale of the money involved. We're talking about an industry worth over 31,000 crore rupees. That entire ecosystem was just thrown into complete and utter chaos, practically overnight.
And that chaos isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It has a very real human cost. An estimated 2 lakh jobs. That's 200,000 people. Developers, marketers, support staff, whose entire livelihoods were suddenly put on the line.
And it doesn't stop there. Think about the message this sends to the rest of the world. You've got 25,000 crore rupees in foreign direct investment that's now suddenly at risk. That damages confidence in India's entire digital market. But here's the biggest twist, the real irony in all of this. The whole stated goal was to protect people from harm, right? But by banning the regulated legal market, the government may have just pushed millions of users toward a completely unregulated, illegal offshore market. This could actually increase the very dangers of addiction and fraud the act was supposed to prevent. But this story has one more twist. Because while the government slammed one door shut, it kind of accidentally propped another one open. And out of all this chaos, a really unexpected opportunity has started to emerge.
For the very first time in Indian law, this act formally recognizes esports as a legitimate competitive sport, totally separate from the online money gaming it was trying to ban. And that simple recognition, it changes everything. It opens the door for government support, for big-time sponsorships, and for esports to be treated like any other major sport.
And you can really see that forced evolution right here. The whole business model had to shift. Before, revenue came from player stakes and winnings. Now, that's gone. It has to come from things like subscriptions or in-app purchases for cosmetic items. The key activity is no longer real money gaming, which is banned, it's esports and social gaming, which are now, in a weird way, being promoted.
All right, so let's boil this all down. What are the big takeaways here? One, that historic legal line between skill and chance in online gaming has been erased by law. Two, the new rules come with severe criminal penalties, completely changing the game for operators. Three, a massive constitutional battle is playing out in the courts as we speak. And four, while one part of the industry faces a crisis, the stage is now set for a huge boom in esports and social gaming.
When you step back, this whole story is about so much more than just gaming. It raises a fundamental question about the country's entire approach to the digital world. When you're faced with a complex, fast-moving industry, is the right path forward careful regulation, or is it outright prohibition? The answer to that question will shape India's digital future for years to come.